Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Shenmue Dojo Interviews. My guest today has been inspired through his life by Shenmue, resulting in a trip across Japan, where he now lives, and a more recent trip across China, including visiting Guilin. Not only that, Shenmue has inspired this person's career choice, and he is now a video games writer at IGN Japan currently. My guest today, and who I'd like to welcome, is Esra Krabbe. Welcome, Esra. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. It's really an honor to be on this podcast, and I kind of started laughing when you said a more recent trip to China because that's already 10 years ago. It's weird to think how fast time feels these days.
It is. I mean, 10 years is recent in my mind, but I swear that's because I'm getting older.
Exactly.
My first question is can you take me on a tour of your gaming history, consoles, moving through to the present day, and any favorite games you had, apart from Shenmue, of course?
Yes, sure. So I got my first Nintendo Entertainment System at my fifth birthday. I remember was something I have really been wanting for a long time. Before that, like I played some like old PC games like Leisure Suit Larry with my father on the PC. It's not really the kind of game you play when you're as a 4 year old, but like those kind of games I already had played. But then like the Nintendo Entertainment System was the first real big thing for me as a gamer. That's like the thing that made me a gamer. So actually, I didn't start with Sega, and after that, I kind of stuck with Nintendo because I got a Super Nintendo after that,
Yeah.
and from there on, it was Nintendo 64. So I was basically a Nintendo kid all the way until Dreamcast came out. And actually, I was gonna get a PlayStation 2
Yeah.
because it was gonna release soon. But it was still really expensive, And I kind of got this like agreement with my parents that if I would have really good grades, they would buy it for me. And then I saw this Dreamcast and it's like half the price of the PlayStation 2. So it's like, if I can get a PlayStation 2, I can get this other system and buy six initial games and have it for the same price as a PlayStation 2. So I like ask my parents, so I can get anything of the same price as a PlayStation 2, right? And they're like, yeah, sure. Like thinking like I'm like after something weird. So then I thought like, okay, I'm gonna get a Dreamcast with so many games. So that's like how I became like a Sega gamer for the first time. And like after that, I started with Virtua Tennis, Sonic Adventure. I think no, Skies of Arcadia was later actually, but like many of the Crazy Taxi, the classic Sega games. But at the time,
Yeah.
like Shenmue had not released yet, so it was not part of like the first six games I got. But then like a little later, like I saw on the back of the box this screenshot of Shenmue, and like the moment I saw that screenshot, I think it was like Ryo and Senhua looking at the moon or something. The moment I saw that, I was like, this game is so different from anything I've seen before. And I knew I had to get that game. Like, I go to my parents and I was like, I want this game. They're like, you just got six game. And then so I had to wait until I was able to buy it by, saving up money myself. But like, once I finally got to play it like that, experiencing the first day of Shenmue, like the first in-game day, was like such a magical experience. Like you're walking down the hill from your home, and you greet the people you know, and then you buy a juice at the vending machine. It's like I'm living someone's life, and like even today, that's a special experience. But in the beginning of the 2000s, there was nothing like it. You would like a video game is like jumping around or like punching someone. It's not living someone's life. That was like really such a life-changing experience for me, and it changed the way I looked at video games in the future. Like to this day, I stopped caring about maybe a bit of an overstatement, but like the real most important thing for me in a video game is like the world that's created and how they let you experience that. So that really became the most important thing for me. Like, how do you tell a story in a video game? How do you let the player experience someone's life? So like that totally shaped the way I became a gamer, and to this day, that's like the main focus of me for playing video games.
Fantastic. So, talking about your first in-game day in Shenmue, can you remember it?
Yes, I remember it very well because Shenmue One needed so much space on the memory card, right? Like I
Yes, it
think
did.
it's like 70 or something, and
Yeah.
I didn't have that much space, and I didn't realize that while playing it. So that first day was just completely lost. but like that made it so much more special because I had to relive that same day, and I was like, at first I was like, damn, I'm gonna have to do the same thing again. But it was totally different. Like there were all these things inside the house that I hadn't noticed yet, and I was like, oh my god, like this game really lets you live someone's life, and you can live it over and over, and you'll have new experience each time you play it. So I was really happy to actually have to replay that game after playing the first day.
Brilliant. And I'm probably going way, way back here, but can you remember any of the things that you saw first time that you didn't see the second time? What were the differences, if you remember?
Yes, I remember getting a winning can for the first time, for example. So I was like, so I thought I bought a Coke, but something completely different came out of the vending machine. I didn't understand why it was. And then the second time I go to the vending machine again and I get a normal Coke. Like, huh, that's weird. So I keep putting money in the vending machine. And like after maybe 5 or 6 times, I finally get a winning can again. And then I realize, okay, so this is like something special. I can do something with it. That's like a small difference I really remember. And I think the first time I played, I went out of the house pretty quickly. And then the
Yeah.
second time, because I already had played it for a while, I realized that by zooming in on objects, you can focus on them and the character does something, there's an interaction. So I really started opening all the cupboards and like finding cockroaches and stuff like that. I think that's something the first time I played that first day, I didn't experience yet simply because I wasn't used with the game system. I hadn't gotten used to the game systems yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what I think Shenmue is about discovery, isn't it? It's about finding out those controls, finding out the world, and like you say, those little details, the opening of a drawer, the flick of a light switch, the cockroaches, it all adds to that wider world building, doesn't it? In terms of creating that environment.
Open world video games are a common thing. Like any gorgeous game wants to be an open world game, right? But
Yes,
but no
absolutely.
game makes a house that detailed to this day. I think it's still something that's maybe games like Life is Strange. They do stuff similar to Shenmue today, but those games they exist out of scenes, right? You have this scene in this
Yes.
house, and then you go somewhere else. But Shenmue is like an open world, and at the same time as detailed as Life is Strange. I mean, there's no game to this day that does that.
No, there isn't, and it's testament to actually the longevity of Shenmue itself that it's probably the only game was that detailed at the time, and like you say, even now.
The thing is it's detailed and expensive at the same time. Like usually you choose one of the two. I'm gonna make a really big open world game, or I'm gonna like make a really focused small game. But Shenmue is both at the same time.
Yes, it is, and when you consider the world expansion in Shenmue 2, for example, it still kept that
Yes.
element, didn't it, of
Mm,
detail, of building that world, building the characters. I mean, I use a comparison between Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2. Shenmue 1 feels like home.
right.
You're at home, everybody knows who you are, and it's quite safe. You go to
Yes.
Shenmue 2 and you come off that boat and you feel lost instantly.
Exactly.
And maybe I'm speaking out of turn a little bit here, but I think there hasn't been a video game, in my opinion, since that's captured those feelings that strongly. And
Mm.
maybe I'm biased. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I totally agree. And I think a comparison I usually make, I use that with Dragon Quest because that's like, a big thing here. Um, let's make it Zelda, for example. In,
Yeah.
in the Ocarina of Time, you start in your own village in Kakariko, right?
Yes, you
So
do.
like that's where you start. You start home and then you go on a journey. But that's like 20 minutes later you're on a journey, right? But in
Yeah.
Shenmue, they make one entire game about before you set on that journey. Like that's total like logically like if that would be proposed as an idea, they're like, no, you need to have the player excited right off the bat. Like he gets up, he wakes up and he says goodbye to his family and he goes on a trip. But Shenmue is like an entire game about letting the player know what is home to the main character. No game takes that much time to create this feeling. And like by the time you play Shenmue 2, you already know who you're from, where you're from. You know your neighbors. You know the girl you liked. You have friends. You even had a part time job. By the time you get set on a journey to Hong Kong, you are completely already a Japanese guy, right? You are
Yeah.
this Japanese stoic martial artist called Ryo Hazuki. By that, you're not Ezra anymore. You're not Matt anymore. You're Ryo, And like to create this feeling before you set on a journey is such a strong thing, to the extent that when I was walking around as Rio in Hong Kong, there's this really weird experience of being a Dutch boy, but you're feeling like you're walking around through Hong Kong as a Japanese guy. Like that's totally insane that Shem was able to create that feeling.
It is, and I think that's why Shenmue resonates so much with the community as a whole. Because I think it was the first game to really put you in the shoes of the protagonist. It was the first
Yes.
first
Mm.
game to communicate his feelings and put you in his position. What would you do as Rio? So you've lost your father. How would you feel? You've lost your ticket to Hong Kong. What do you do? It was the first game to really sort of delve into those inner workings, those inner feelings, and absorb the player into that world, into that feeling. I think.
I think it does it better than any game to this day, but that's also because it does it so slow, you know? It
Yeah,
really takes time in doing that. And I think that's like one big reason why it doesn't appeal to a certain type of player. I can really understand why that's the case. But for those people that have that time, that have that patience to really become this character, there's no other experience like it.
I'd agree, and I always liken it to if you give it a chance and it takes your heart, you're sold on Shenmue for life, in my
Yes, I think
opinion.
so. I don't think you can just generally think, yeah, that was a good game and move on. Like if you play Shenmue 1 and 2 to the end and you play it while you're enjoying it, like it's even if it at this age, you know, when the re-releases came out a few years ago,
Yeah,
I really tried to make a lot of people play it, and the people that played it, like for some of them, like it became their best game of all time and stuff like that. You know, even after they've passed their 30s, you know, like if you really you need to be the type of gamer, and you need to give it some time, and maybe today you need to get, you know, beyond the age it shows on the surface. But once you're able to get what it's about, I think I don't believe that like the reason I love Shenmue is because I played it at the right time when I was a kid. I really think that as an experience, it is that special.
I completely agree with you. And likewise, when the re-releases came out, I got some friends to play it. I gifted a couple of copies away because I'm thinking, right, let's just get this game out there as much as we can. And
Right.
it splits people down the middle. I
Exactly. Yeah.
think it's
Hmm.
either they can't get it, don't grasp it, it's too slow pace for them. And I completely understand that because it is a slow development game. We've had 3 games so far, and we're not even halfway through the story. But then on the flip side, if you engage with it and it gets your imagination and it gets in your mind, it gets in your heart, it's a game like no other in the way it
Hmm.
communicates its story. And couple that with the story itself, an amazing soundtrack, which we could talk about in an episode on its own, quite
Right.
frankly. And going back to obviously 1999, 2000, it was utterly groundbreaking.
It was completely. It was too groundbreaking that many people didn't understand what it was about. You know, it was like at least it depends because it's still like it's groundbreaking at the same time, but it's groundbreaking in a way that's not for everyone. Like it's not GTA 3, you know, that game was groundbreaking in a much more casual way. I think Shenmue
Yes.
was groundbreaking and at the same time very niche. So I think that was like its biggest problem, is that it's an amazing game for a certain group of people, but it costs the amount of money that you need for a really big success, you know. And in that way, it's kind of a problematic series, because for that attention of detail, for that amount of, you know, density in a video game, you need money. You know, if you want every single NPC to be unique, if you want to be able to enter every single house, if you want them to be able to say something in full voice that even changes as you progress the story, you're gonna need to spend a lot of money on that game. And the people like you and me that got what made it special were not enough to uh, you know, m- make that kind of amount of money and make money out of it, you know. I think that's the biggest problem of the series.
Yeah, like you say, it's such a vastly dense, well detailed game,
Yes.
series, franchise, whatever you want to call it. But it is so niche.
Yes.
It's the way it builds. It's slow, but I always find it builds to a big crescendo at the end where all the action kicks off. But I think there's a element of gamers now who aren't into that for whatever reason. That's completely
Hmm.
their choice. I respect that opinion completely. But a lot of games now are very fast paced from the get go, aren't they? And Shenmue's completely the opposite in that respect.
Yes.
But it was so groundbreaking because it gave the ideas, the concept of an open world could be done, the amount of detail could be done, and so many games borrow from it now. It's
Hmm.
without Shenmue, I don't think we have the open world genre as a whole that we have today.
I think though it's interesting because you mentioned that games are getting that much more fast paced today. Yeah, at the same time, there's a lot of variety today, like especially with indie games, like experiences like Journey. They or like even what
Yes.
I mentioned before, like Life is Strange, stuff like that. There's a lot of games that take it slow that have a similar mindset to Shenmue, but they're more focused. Like Journey is an experience you finish in 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
Like Shenmue's biggest problem is that it is a really big budget game and at the same time a very niche game. And I think if I would be allowed to direct the way the future of the series would go, I would say like make it something like Life Strange. Don't of course I want those detailed open environments, but uh, it's just hard to justify the cost that what they cost to make. I think today there's a lot of different things you can do as an indie game, like walking simulators, for example. There's a lot you
Yeah.
can do to make slow paced games engaging and then make them at a cost that it can be niche and that it can make money while being niche. I think in that way Shenmue still has to find its best format in modern times. That's what I felt for Shenmue 3.
So, sort of following up from that point, is do you think a more episodic route would be better, like chapter by chapter, for example, going forward?
Well, of course, I don't have the exact numbers or anything for how well it's sold, but at least from what we know from like Deep Silver's, how do you call those in English? Annual calls and stuff like that, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah, the
sound like
financials.
it sold crazy numbers or anything. But from my interview I did with Yusan after Shenmue 3 was released, it did came on the surface that it costs a lot more than obviously just the amount of money that was backed by backers. So
Yeah, of course.
um, I think probably financially, I don't think it was a disaster or anything, but it was probably a difficult thing to say, like, okay, we're gonna make another game just like this. Uh, so in that regard, obviously, like the ideal thing that I would want as a gamer, if I wouldn't have to think about like the costs and stuff like that, is like uh, a full-fledged Shenmue 4 with like big environments to explore, detailed environments, improved fighting, being taught moves again, stuff like that. But if you think what the series needs to be profitable, I think at this point, with so many good games out there, what we really want as fans is the story, right?
Yes, we do.
So I think like something more focused on the story, kind of like I keep saying Life is Strange, or like a David Cage game like Heavy Rain, something like that, that takes you from scene to scene. I know the stuff in between is really great, but um, if you think realistically, I think that might be a good direction to head in for the future of the series.
So, is there an argument then that if they went down, say, one area, really densely detailed, lots of story, do you think that that could be the formula for success going forward?
Right. So you mean like, for example, Shenmue 3 only being in Bailu, but
Yeah, that'd be
that
a really
being
good
really detailed in
example.
story, for example, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure. I guess that could be a way to do it. You obviously don't need to make two cities, so that would like be a lot cheaper to make. But I think like it all comes down to what Yusam wants,
It
because
does.
I think that he really still has that ambitious spirit. He really still wants to make like generally like one of the most impressive games of its time. I really appreciate that spirit of Yusan. I think it's something that really characterizes him as a creator. Like even at this age, even with so many years not having been able to create like a big game like this, he still like really wants to make the best game possible and the most ambitious game possible. And I think with this mindset for Yusan, like telling him to make like a more focused short game is kind of a difficult thing to do, because for us fans, there's, of course, every fan wants something different, but some of us, just want to get the story done. But if you tell Yusan just make a game focused on the story, that's obviously not what he wants. So I think it all comes down to a balance between what's profitable and what kind of game does Yusan really want to make.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that actually that if it wasn't as ambitious with Shenmue Three in terms of the size of the game, the area, I don't. Maybe it's just a personal point here, but it's part of Yu Suzuki's character to be ambitious, and
Exactly.
Shenmue has
Yeah.
always been ambitious, and
Mm.
I wonder if it'd lose a bit of its soul if it wasn't. But maybe that's just me, the way
I
I
understand
feel
what you
about
mean,
it.
but I think that you can be ambitious and in a minimal way, right? So, for example, you only have one small area. I think Shenmue like was all about that, right? It's not that big, but it's
No,
like
it's not.
what it does within the size is important. So if you shrink that to something even smaller, like I think you can make an amazing, really good game with a Shenmue feel that takes place, for example, in one big house. You could do that. I think for the story, maybe it would be difficult, but let's say that you've entered the house of Shenhua's ancestors, for example, right? I'm just
Yeah.
saying something, and together with Shenhua, you walk through this house and you explore the details, and Shenhua talks about her memories, stuff like that. You get to know each other better. I think in one house and make that detailed like crazy and put like a lot of experiences in that one house. Like, originally Shenmue 1.5, I said, was going to be on a boat, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So I think like a really focused experience on just one small area, but pack it with like memorable experiences could make a great Shenmue game, and one that's much cheaper than like this crazy big city like Niaowu.
Yeah. And actually, I think as long as you capture the Shenmue spirit, I think fans would be quite happy with something like that. I know I would happily.
Yes.
I mean, I'll take anything Shenmue, quite frankly, with you.
Same here.
Um, but I think that's the passion for the series. But speaking about the passion of the series, obviously, Shenmue's had quite a profound impact on your life. I mean, it's
For
inspired
sure.
you to go to Japan. You've been to China. Can you talk me through some of those trips and how you ended up in Japan, China, and just talk me through some of those trips?
It's quite a long story because it's basically my entire life. Like, if you put it in a nutshell, without Shenmue 1, I was already into Japan before that, to be honest. So it was kind of
Yes.
like I always wanted to go to Japan. I already wanted to live there before Shenmue, but
Hmm.
it was like a fantasy. Like it was a world that was so far away. I could never experience it. And if Shem wouldn't have been there, I don't know, because you never know what would have happened. But um, it became such a realistic dream after playing Shenmue. I know what a neighborhood in Japan is like right now. I know what it's like to go to the convenience store, stuff like that. So this dream really started feeling like reality, and I think that was like something that motivated me to really, really work on it. I started. I think if you look at it, before I started playing Shenmue, I was into Japan, but I didn't really do anything to achieve that dream. But after playing Shenmue, I started going to Japanese classes. I started practicing martial arts. So there were like these things that you can identify as like someone trying to actually make that game that dream come true. That was really after Shenmue. So it was like this vague dream that was made reality through Shenmue, I feel. So and this was all happening as I was starting to play Shenmue 2. And
Yep.
by that time, I was reading in magazines about Shenmue and stuff. And I was like, I was really into this Japan simulator experience. And then I'm like, okay, so we're going to Hong Kong now? I just want to be in Japan. So at that time, it felt a bit sad in a way. But then
Yeah.
when I got to play Shenmue 2, I was like, whoa, I'm on this epic journey as a Japanese guy, and it made me realize that you know, okay, first I have to become Japanese, and I have to become a Japanese martial artist. And once I have achieved that goal, then I'm going to have to become a Japanese martial artist that travels the world. So that's like the way that Shenmue kind of like created two goals. Each game created a separate goal for me. Like one was becoming Japanese, going to Japan, living there for the rest of my life. And then Shenmue 2 made me realize that once I had achieved that goal, I needed to take that goal and take my Japanese identity and go see the rest of the world, you know? So in that way, it was really like it created the entire rest of my life in a way.
So Ezra, can you talk me through some of your trip through China, where you visited, your experiences, and just the whole thing together for me?
Sure, yeah. So it's interesting because I've explained how I'm like completely influenced by Shenmue. My whole life is like pretty much depending on it. But the funny thing is, I've never been kind of like about going to certain sites as a pilgrimage. So the funny thing is, before I started traveling, I had lived in Japan for 8 years. I had never
Yeah.
been to the Buita.
Oh.
It's not very common, right? It's pretty weird. So for me, it's always kind of been that I don't have to be exactly at the same place the game took place, but it's just like a feeling of going after the life that Ryo Hazuki had, So without going to the Buita, I have my own Dobuita in a way, right? So I have my own neighborhood in Japan that I lived in. I had my own dojo I was training at. So I never had the feeling I need to go to the Buita. I went like a few years ago for the first time, and that was a really good experience. Though I really felt like I should have gone earlier. That being said, like it was the same when I went traveling that I didn't go like, okay, I have to go to the Menmo Temple, I have to go to Guilin, I have to visit the Kowloon Walled City remains in Hong Kong. It was just the fact that I was, wearing this big backpack and walking through China and fighting with many different martial artists. That was the experience. It didn't have to be exactly the same in the same location as where Neil was. So what I did was some of the most memorable Shenmue-like events were first of all training at the Shaolin Temple. So I went to the Shaolin Temple where there's a lot of martial arts schools near that temple, and like these schools are huge, like they have like 200 students or something like that, or even more. And there's like hundreds of students like standing at the ground, like doing punches and kicks, like it's amazing. And first my idea was to go to one of those big schools, but then it turned
Yeah.
out to be like when I went looking, it turned out to be like really touristic. So it was like you would get put into a group of foreigners, and then there was an English teaching teacher that would explain you kung fu history and stuff like that. And I kind of wanted the real thing, like a thing where they were like, if you would go there and they would never have seen a foreigner, like that's a bit extreme, but something in that
Yeah.
direction is what I wanted. So I hired a bicycle and I started going to the more remote places of the area. And I found this really small old school tucked away. Actually, today it became a really famous school, but at the time, it was like there were like 60 students, and there was one other British guy, one other foreigner. But for the rest, it was like just Chinese students, and it was like really dirty, really old, and like the toilet looked like Resident Evil, stuff like that, and there was this master at the school who was a really like the kind of character you would imagine Ryo meeting in Shenmue, like kind of like he was a guy, but kind of like the male version of Xu Ying, like really a really good person, someone that really you know uh, was growing his spirit as a martial artist. So it was really amazing to be with this guy. And then after he started respecting me, he called me to his room where he did this tea ceremony and showed me these ancient Shaolin scripts and stuff like that. So those were really like moments that where like Shaolin is not a location we have seen in Shenmue yet, but it felt like I was living Shenmue. So that was really the Shaolin. I stayed there for 1 month. It was really hard because we would have to wake up every morning at 5 o'clock, and then we
Yeah.
had an early meeting training, which was like from 5 to 6, I think. And then we had
Oh.
a break, and at 7 we start the morning training. So there's like two separate trainings in the morning. And it's like like I was a karate teacher in Japan, so I was thinking like I'm not gonna get tired. I'm not gonna get lose against anyone. But then, like, the amount of time that they were training was really exhausting for me. And like, karate is much more like, when you practice karate, it's they are, how do you say that in English, they're much more about logical thinking. Like for
Yeah.
example, if you're going to hit the sandbag, you do it 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes to, train your stamina, and then you practice certain moves and stuff. But in China, in the Shaolin temple, it was like, okay, here's the sandbag, you start punching it, and 1 hour later I check up on you. It's like no other instructions, and it's just 1 hour of hitting the sandbag like crazy, and all the kids are falling down. They don't have enough water and stuff like that. It was really unsophisticated, but that made it like really interesting in a way. And I remember after that 1 hour sandbag training, I was like completely exhausted, and then I went with the other Chinese kids to drink water from the tap.
Yeah.
And I was drinking it like crazy. And later, the British guy was saying, "It's like, what are you doing, man? Like, the Chinese people, they grew up here, so they can drink the tap water here. But if a foreigner does that, you're gonna get sick." And I was not aware of that at all. But in the end, I didn't get sick, so it was okay. But it was a really different experience from what I would have had if I would have gone to one of those big schools and would have been treated as a tourist.
Yeah. It sounds really, really tough, actually. I
It
mean,
was really tough. It was really extreme. But the funny thing is that, as martial artists, of course, the main teacher was really devoted. It was like his life. But
yeah.
most kids actually there, they don't go there because they like it. Some of them are kids without parents. How do you call it in English?
Orphans.
Orphans, right? They're orphans. So, and the teacher is nice enough to pick them up from the streets and have them become martial artists. And that's good and all, but for those kids, like for me, it's my passion. I enjoy doing it. But if you don't care about martial arts and it's just because you were picked up, training for 8 days an hour is it's like some of them might have thought I would have preferred to just be an orphan on the streets. So it was really hard for them, but they do become really physically strong. So sparring against them was really fun because physically they were stronger than me, but because they didn't enjoy what they were doing, I could still beat them. So I really realized that I think it's for any sport or martial, it's like a really important factor is not how long you train. Of course that's important, or how strong you are, but it's how much are you enjoying what you're doing. And I think in that regard, most of the Chinese students there, they were just being there because they didn't have another place to do, to be. And most of them, after they finish training, they go to army, and only the really good ones, they become like professional fighters or coaches at the school, something like that. So the few people that really become good, they were really good, but like most of them were just physically very strong, but they just didn't want to fight.
Wow. And I suppose it goes into the whole teachings of Shenmue, actually. There's a lot of martial arts is in the mind, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So I think for like just training martial arts in China is an experience that feels 100% like Shenmue. And it really shows that Yusan, he went to Shaolin Temple actually, and he went
He
to the
did, yeah.
Bajikwan style. So he really knows what he's doing. He's not just, reimagining some kung fu movie or something. He's doing the real thing. So what as a martial artist I really respect about Shenmue is that even after having been a martial artist for so many years, Shenmue still feels like, yeah, that's correct. That's what martial arts is like. So it really shows how much Yusan, how deeply he studied martial arts for the game.
He did, and he got a couple of cracked ribs for his trouble, if I remember
Yes,
reading it
exactly.
correctly. So that's devotion for you,
It
isn't
shows
it?
how
To be
devoted.
fair.
And yeah, you actually have some of the old videos from like the Yokohama Pacific event in which you see Yusan doing moves, and he really knows what he's doing. That's really something that I found fascinating after getting into martial arts myself.
It's testament to the craft, actually, and to
Exactly, it
his
really is.
dedication to it.
And then
Fantastic.
there's two other big Shenmue moments for me during my travels.
Yeah,
One is actually really close to the Shaolin Temple, because Shaolin Temple and its surroundings is where China's ancient capitals were for many thousands of years. It only like became Beijing in the last so many years. So the reason that Shaolin Temple is located there is because there was so much culture there. in those times. So actually, from about 1 hour by bus from Shaolin, and that's incredibly close for such a big country. Like you go somewhere 20 hours by train and people call it close by, you know? So that's how big the country is. So if you imagine there's a place 1 hour by bus from there called Loyang. And I think if you're a Shenmue fan, you know what Loyang means to the series, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah, the tapestry in Shenhua's house.
Exactly. And at that time, I didn't realize that. So I was walking through Loyang and I was feeling this vibe. It's an ancient capital of China, so there's a lot of culture there. There's like these incredible 2,000 Buddha sculptures that are carved into the wall and stuff. And there's like the oldest Buddhist temple in China. And I'm walking around there and I'm feeling this weird connection. And I start realizing I'm in a place that Shenhua mentioned. I didn't know it before I went, so it was so weird to find out as I was walking there that, oh yeah, now I remember Shenhua was talking about this place. So that was such a weird coincidence for me because I didn't go there because of Shenmue. Because like I mentioned, I don't go pilgrimaging. So just being there by chance felt so weird. And that's like one of the only moments that I went to Shenmue Dojo. And I remember at the time Peter replied to me and I told him like I'm in Loyang at the moment and stuff like and he's like awesome man and stuff like that. So that's it was such a magical moment for me to be at the locations mentioned in Shenmue without realizing myself before going there.
That's brilliant, and it's good. It's nice that you sort of stumbled upon it. It's probably the way I would put
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah.
So and it had that. It sort of resonated. Hang on a second. There's something familiar about this place. There's a feeling I have about it, and then it's that link to Shenmue, as you say.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
And I think I first felt the connection before I realized Shenmue.
yeah,
So I think there's something special about that place. And that's the way Shenhua mentioned it. She hasn't been there, but without having been there, she can imagine the streets, the people walking around. And that's really the kind of mysterious vibe I felt in that place before realizing it was related to Shenmue. So in that regard, I think any Shenmue fan should go there without, probably because in Shenmue 3 that painting or whatever it is isn't there anymore. So
no, it's
it's
not.
probably scrapped from the future of the series. So you probably won't go there, is what I think. But I think in a deeper way, it is a part of Shenmue, and just being in such a place without you having been there is just as important to me because you really can feel the mysterious feeling Yusan was going after for the series.
Yeah, he can, and we know. Well, I mean, he might end up somewhere similar. I know Shenhua talks about in Shenmue 3 dreaming of a big imperial city where the emperor and empress are alive. She doesn't
Right.
mention Luang by name,
I think
but
that has to be Loyang though, because Loyang
yeah,
is an ancient capital, and it's conveniently close to the Shaolin Temple. So it sounds like that has to be Loyang. If not, it's gonna have to be a place like Xi'an, which was a capital for a long time, or Chengdu. But I think it must be Loyang, especially because she also mentioned it, in the game.
yeah. There we go, everybody. Shenmue 4, we're going to Luang.
I really hope so, but I don't. Else, if that would have been the case, they wouldn't have scrapped that part from Shenmue 3.
No, this is
Mm,
true.
yes,
Right.
and then the last thing. This is actually closer to an actual pilgrimage. Is even if I'm not a pilgrimage guy, I had to go to Guilin. That's not something
Oh,
I
of
I, fe-
course.
I felt I could miss. So Guilin was full of mysteries for us at the time because Bailu doesn't actually exist, and all we had is Yo arriving into this town, or at least like Senhua's house. So
Yeah,
there was
yeah,
not actually much to go after. Like it's basically just the feeling of seeing those mountains, seeing the Lee River, and there's not much else you can do. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make my stay at Guilin special in its own right. So what I did is from Guilin City, I started just with my 20 kilograms backpack. I just started walking across the river, and like 70 kilometers ahead there's this village called Yangshuo, which seems a little bit similar to Niaowu in some ways. So at that time, of course, I had no idea. But okay, I thought I'm going that way. So I had a 20-kilometer day walk at the first day or something. I was completely exhausted, and on the way, I find this bamboo boat
Yeah.
laying in front of someone's house. So I knock on the door. It's like a completely, rural place in the middle of Guilin with, like the tourists only go to the main locations. Like, and it was somewhere in between as I've been walking. So these people are like, "What is this foreigner doing in front of our house?" And I'm like, um, "Can I buy this boat, please?" And they let me into their house, and it's like a different world. It's like 100 years. If there wouldn't have been this old television, it would have been 100 years ago. Like people are sitting on stones, so that's really how different it was. And that was like what Bailu was to us before we actually got there. How Shenhua explains what Bailu is like while you're walking up
Yeah. Mm.
mountain sounds like a village, that's completely out of touch with modern times. And then in Shenmue 3 we come to Bailu, and there's a video game center and all. But at that time, that was really how I imagined Bailu to be. So it was such a weird experience to be in a farmer's house that looks like something from ancient times. And then I buy this boat, and the rest of my journey I actually went like 20 or 30 kilos on this bamboo boat. And of course the boat was laying in front of the house because people weren't using it anymore. So like just by going on the water with that boat, like half of my body was in the water. It was like basically sinking. And like I would use the paddle as fast as I could, but it still wasn't as fast as walking. That was basically, it was nonsensical to use that boat, but it still made it such a memorable experience. And then like it turned midnight, and it was middle of the night, and there was no light, there was nobody around. The only sounds I could hear were like birds or like animal sounds, like, and it was
Mm.
pitch dark. So, you know, going on a boat on a river and not being able to see anything is scary as hell. So it's like, if there's a waterfall or anything like that, I'm gonna die. So it's like, okay, I can't go on. So I bring the boats to the shore, and I start laying on it. And it's like it's November, which is pretty hot in Guilin, but like in the night it gets cold as hell. So I'm starving. I haven't had anything to eat, so it was really hard. But then there came this farmer from far away, because he had noticed me, and he took me to his home, where he let me stay. And it was like, again, such an experience of like 100 years ago, because they didn't have flooring in that house. The floor was just the same as outside of the house.
Oh
It was
wow.
just yeah. And there was no TV or anything, and there was like a pig walking around through the living room. So that, like, to be in a place like that, made it worth to have taken the journey. And then the guy didn't speak any English, of course, and he asked me where I was from. So I'm telling him, like, the Netherlands, in Chinese, in my broken Chinese.
Yeah.
And he's like really impressed. He says, "The Netherlands. I wonder if there's ever been anyone else from the Netherlands to China." Like, I think I'm not the first one, probably, but that's how much this guy was out of touch from reality. And then he said, "I have a treasure that I want to show you," and he brings me this fridge magnet of Chicago, which he says he found, from it came from the river. And I look at this magnet, and yeah, for us that's like nothing special, but
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt his feelings. So I'm like, "Oh, this is really special." And I can see this place here because it says Chicago. I know this place. I know this. And he says, "Yes, those letters are English." That's just, this guy was so different from the modern China that we know from the news, like the economic power that it's become. Like, in the rural parts, it was such a different experience. And then the next day, because I arrived there at night, the next morning I could see what the village looked like, because it was so dark before, and it really was like people were getting water from the well and stuff like that. So it was such an experience for me. And in the end, like, it wasn't directly related to Shenmue, but at the time I felt like, this is the closest I could have been to actually experiencing what life in Bailu might have been like. So I could have kind of, through that experience, I found peace with myself to not ever being able to play Shenmue 3 or what would come after, because I kind of experienced myself, it feels like.
And it's amazing with China how there's two sides to it. You've got the, like you say, the modern superpower that it is, and then you've
Right.
got a village in the middle of Guilin where they're just yeah, 100 years ago, and it's like going in a time machine. I think it's probably the best way to describe it.
Yes, exactly. And that was the feeling that made the last part of Shenmue 2 in Guilin so special. Because before you were in Guilin, you were in Yokosuka, you were in the modern world. And then Shenfa, walking the mountains with her together and closely getting nearby Bailu village and learning all these things about that town is kind of like, you're in the midst of a time traveling experience, right?
Yeah, you are, and it's crazy actually that there's places in China that are still like that. But it's amazing to think that lifestyle, and like you say, the house hasn't got flooring and everything else. It's a wonderful experience to hear about.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's 10 years have passed from then, so who knows? Maybe it's much more modern by now. I don't know, but at the time it was like that. And then when I got to play Shenmue 3, Bailu was so much more modern than what I experienced. And Niaowu especially is like some rich people's town. So like I think the world building in Shenmue 3 was fantastic, but at the same time I kind of missed that feeling that Shenmue 2, the end of Shenmue 2 got me, of going somewhere where there was nothing, where the kids didn't know what capsule toys were, like in the end the town was filled with capsule toys. That's kind of like the experience I hoped to get from Shenmue 3 that I didn't get. But then at the same time I was able to, lucky enough to experience it in real life. And after I came back from my travelings, like through China and the rest of Asia and Australia, after like 2 or 3 years, I came back to Japan, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen after Shenmue 2. So I didn't really have this goal to achieve anymore. So it was just the thing of having to wait for the series to continue. And at that time, Shenmue 3 hadn't been released yet.
Yeah,
But then in 2015, Shenmue 3 got announced at E3. That was the moment. From that, I think the next day, I started making videos for YouTube. And that's how I became a video game journalist. So in that way, Shenmue 3, again, like maybe not in a direct way like Shenmue 1 and 2, but in a way, it again inspired me to become a video game journalist and where I am today. So in that regard, it completely paves the way of my entire life.
that is an amazing story to hear that Shen, because I think it does. It inspires people, Shenmue, in various different ways. You talk about picking up Japanese lessons. James, who co-owns the dojo with me, is doing Japanese lessons and wants to live over there because of
Right.
Shenmue.
Yeah, I heard so. Yeah.
He visited China because of Shenmue.
Mm-hmm.
You've gone to Japan. You've been to China. You've become a video games journalist because of Shenmue.
It sounds a bit like I'm kind of like making an overstatement, but it really shaped my entire life.
I don't think it's an overstatement at all because it's inspired you, hasn't it? And I think what's a credit to yourself is going, this has inspired me, and you've taken it and run with it, and that's and I have the utmost admiration for people who go and do something like that. That something inspires them, and they go, do you know
I
what? I'm
was
going
just so
for it.
young and reckless. I was like, when I first came here, I was like 15. So, if it would be now, if I would play Red Dead Redemption 2 right now, I was like, I'm gonna become a cowboy. It was like everyone's gonna be. But like, if you're 14 when you play Shenmue for the first time and you're like, I'm gonna become a Japanese martial artist, people are like, they don't really stop you because they know that you're gonna stop at some point anyway, right? But I I didn't stop at any point. That's the weird thing that happened to me, I guess. And like, if you go at such a young age, like I was like, I've been living here since I was 16, and I go to high school here, and after that university. By the time that you're 20 or something, it's already like it doesn't really make sense anymore to go back, if like it's become such a normal thing to be here. So I think if you go much later, probably you have important people back home. You maybe have a girlfriend back home. You have maybe
Yeah.
even family. You have so many responsibilities. But I came at an age that I didn't have anything at all to worry about. So I think that really made it possible for me to keep going after this dream.
And it's a dream that obviously has been successfully achieved. I would say you're in Japan. You're a video game. You've done so much
Yeah, for
because of
sure.
Shenmue. And I want to talk. I want to talk a little about sort of Shenmue 2 to 3 and the
Right.
gap in between it. I mean, did obviously the series went into hiatus, which for a series it's been so inspirational on a personal level. How did you stay in touch with the community? Did you follow Shenmue in those intervening years?
So I've never been someone that comments on the forums or someone that makes a comment on YouTube. Even I don't do that. I
Yeah,
never did that. So I think with like a few exceptions, I've never commented anything about it on the internet before I became a game journalist. But there hasn't been a single day
yeah,
that I didn't check Shenmue Dojo if there might be some Shenmue news.
brilliant. So then going into sort of E3 2015, I'm going to ask this question because I ask everybody this. Did you see the forklift
Uh,
tweet from Yu
I
Suzuki
think
the
I
night
didn't actually.
before?
No, I think I saw that after the announcement. Yes.
Okay, so when it got announced, it was a complete shock.
Yes, it was, and I found out while I was working at my company at the time, and it was kind of like a strict company, so I couldn't like notice and start screaming or something like that. I think I noticed at like 11 a.m. or something, and
Yeah,
I was like, okay, so this is a joke again. Like we have these jokes each year.
yeah,
And then I
yeah.
start realizing that it's true. I'm like, um, I'm going out for lunch, and the moment I left the apartment, I started screaming like crazy, running through the streets of Shibuya. It was such an amazing feeling, and of course, the rest of that day. The only thing I did was checking the Kickstarter page, how much it had reached at that moment. I remember this is kind of a funny story that maybe my wife would get angry at, but like, and about like I think a few weeks later, like the day Shenmue 3 was announced, I came home like screaming like crazy. And a
Yeah,
few weeks
yeah.
later, I got a phone call when I was at work, and my wife told me that she was pregnant. And that day, I came home much quieter. So it seems like so Shenmue is that much more important to you.
Oh, I bet you were in trouble for
No,
that.
actually, she kind of saw the humor in it, so it was okay.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good at least. No, fair enough. So, sort of talking about the Kickstarter itself, how long did it take you to back it?
Well, I don't have at the time I didn't have a credit card, so I
Mhm.
had no idea how to do it. So, but I knew my wife had a credit card, so I think I messaged her to ask her for her credit card information. And there's this problem because my wife is Taiwanese. I met her when I was traveling,
Oh yeah,
and Taiwanese also call their money dollar.
right. Yeah.
In when it's used in English, they use the dollar sign. So I was like, "Can I use your credit card to back something for $300?" And I had no idea that she was thinking of Taiwanese money, and that would be like $10 or something, $3 Taiwanese dollars. So, so I start backing $300 while my wife is thinking I'm doing something like $10. And then when I came back and she saw how much I used, she's like, "You cheated me" and stuff like that. But I really didn't know that she was thinking that way. But it became a bit of a problem because she didn't think I would use that much money.
Oh dear.
But still, compared to all the amazing fans, $300 was nothing. I remember.
Well, yeah, but every little helped at the end of the day. It didn't matter if you were backing for $1, $100, $10,000, or anything in between. It got Shenmue 3 off the ground, didn't it?
I remember actually it was like during E3, and my birthday was a little bit before that.
Yeah.
And my parents asked me if I want something, and I always don't know what I want for my birthday. But like at that point, I called my parents after that, and I asked them, if you still want to buy me a birthday present, please back an additional $100 for Shenmue. And my parents both did that, so they're on the
Oh,
list as well, I think.
fantastic. Oh, well, that's a really good idea. Actually, I like that.
Yeah, it was a good birthday present for sure.
I remember the Kickstarter. People were gifting copies to their friends or backing it on behalf of their friends. I don't know. The Kickstarter really sort of captured that imagination, and I mean, I think it shows how revered Shenmue is, considering within what minutes the Kickstarter page had crashed because of the announcement. I mean, you go back to that E3 announcement, and there's a standing ovation
Right.
for Yu Suzuki and Shenmue, and it's one of those games that I think, whether you like it or you hate it, from a gameplay point of view, I think you can respect it.
If you're in the video game industry and you have never heard of Shenmue, I think you're kind of you have a problem, to be honest. Of course, I understand that like many people think it was a product of this time and stuff. I don't agree with that stuff, but I understand that there's many people like that, and I think. Especially after they got re-released and after Shenmue 3 came out, like it's kind of become like a common thing to say that it's like it was great back then and it's not anymore today. I kind of feel bad about this new way that many people are looking at Shenmue, and I really hope that more people find out that there's so much more than those kind of opinions to it.
Yeah, I would second that. I think it's unfairly categorized
Yes,
as a
exactly.
slow, boring experience that's a product of the time and doesn't hold up today.
Mm.
Whereas I would argue that it's storytelling, especially in the first two games, and holds up to any game, to any modern game today.
I think especially two. I think two is much more easy for people to get into because its pace is
Yeah.
so much faster. I think actually,
Yeah.
as what made it so special for me is really that slow start for Shenmue One. But if you want to have a commercially successful game, if you would have started it with Shenmue Two, I think much more people would have understood it.
Yeah, because I mean, you think of the opening of Shenmue 2, what you're getting robbed within the first 10 minutes of the game, and you're into a fight.
The action starts right away. It's exciting right away. I think that's so much more easy to understand for many people. So in that regard, for me, what made it special is really starting with Shenmue One. But like, if you think
Yeah.
of it as a business, maybe if they started with Shenmue Two, things might have been different. I sometimes really think that.
Yeah, and I know it originally started off, didn't it? Shenmue 1 and 2 were going to be one game
Yeah,
together, and
exactly.
then it
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
got split
They
up.
wanted to probably make the first part much slower. I mean, shorter to go on to Shenmue Two much faster. Then again, that might have been the correct business decision, but like the reason that people like you and me cannot forget about this game is really how it takes time and really creates this other dimension that feels sometimes even more real than the one you're living in.
Yeah, and it does. It creates an escape for everybody, but that's because of the world and the pace and everything that goes with it.
Exactly. So if it would have started like more like an action-packed experience that people would understand, maybe it would have been more successful at that time. But would people still have been talking about it like this 20 years later? That's another question. That's really what made it so special.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I had they gone in with Shenmue 2, I don't know. I think because Shenmue 1 gives you those foundations for the character, you're invested in it. So Shenmue 2, all the hard, heavy lifting's been done.
Right.
So you go straight into Shenmue 2 and you're already invested in it. You're already invested in the story, which I think just adds to that overall
Mm.
experience. And I wonder if you'd lose that maybe if you didn't have Shenmue 1.
Of course, you'd lose something for sure. You'd lose some really special feeling. But then again, some people don't care about that feeling.
True.
So for those people, maybe that would have been a way to make them like Shenmue. But then at the same time, that would be something really. It wouldn't be as deep, for those people. So
Mm,
they wouldn't have been that focal to keep the series alive and stuff like that. So I think in the end, what made it that special and the reason it came back is really the reason that its pace was so much different from any other game.
yeah, definitely. And how I think it inspired the way we feel about it. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking of sort of inspiration, obviously it's inspired you to go into video game journalism. And one bit I want to pick up on is with re-releases themselves. 2018 Christmas and
Yes.
Christmas with Dobuita, you were involved in that. Can you talk me through how you sort of became involved in that event and how that all came together?
Oh, you mean the Shenmue fan event? Ah,
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yes. Basically, it was my idea, I would say. I was in contact with the people from Yokosuka
Yeah,
because I reported on the travel guide they did, right?
yeah, I remember that.
The pamphlet. So
Yes, yes.
and I think they showed up at some IGN Japan events, and we got talking, and was like, couldn't we don't do something like that? And they were really into the idea. So we were like, let's do that. And from there on, I did, like, the preparing of the presentation, the like talking with Matsukaze-san and the other people on board and stuff like that, and they did all the stuff, like, finding a venue and stuff like that. And they created all the iconic the box of Abe store and stuff like that. So it was basically a collaboration between IGN Japan and Yokosuka City. So yeah, it was really good because financially, Yokosuka City was nice enough to fund all of it. Because
Oh,
for IGN
fantastic.
Japan, there wouldn't have been any profit in it, so it would have been just a hobby for me, and I could have never been able to do something big like that without them on board. So it was really great that they were willing to do something like that. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think in the end, like 125 people showed up or something, and it was
Oh, wow.
really amazing to be in an environment where everyone loves Shenmue. It's like, it's not something like if I've lived for like 33 years, and I've found someone that likes Shenmue by chance maybe two or three times in my life. So to be with 125 people like that in the same room is like such a special experience.
God, I remember the event. I think did it streamed live, didn't it?
Yes, we did a live stream for the talk show, right? And after that, there were like other activities and just talking together with fans and stuff like that. But the main talk show, we did a live stream. Yes, that's great, and it's been subtitled actually. Actually, the people from Yokosuka did the subtitles as well, so they really went all in on it.
Yes, they did. I remember it now, thinking about it. Such a good event, and so many. I don't. Shenmue fans come out the woodwork for things like that. I think an event pops up, and all of a sudden you get hundreds of Shenmue fans turn up.
Yeah, because people, say that, especially like for Shenmue, the Western fan base is so much stronger than the Japanese. I think to a certain extent that's true, but it's also kind of a difference in culture, because in the West, being vocal about what you like is I think much more normal than here.
Yeah,
So people don't really, make all these big ideas of creating ways to, get the series back and stuff like that. But I think they do really care, and especially like if you look on Twitter and like all the fan art and stuff like that, there's a lot of really invested Japanese fans in that regard. And I think that event really showed that there's a lot of Japanese people that care for the series as well. I think in Japan and in the West, it's always a niche thing. But like regardless of where you're from, there's a niche group of people that really understand this game, and that's the same in Japan. I think this event really showed that there's a lot of Japanese people that care for the series as well.
yeah, very much so. And you talk about the fan art. Actually, I'm talking. You look at Shenmue World. There's a lot of Japanese fan art in
Yes,
there.
exactly. Yes.
And that's just a snippet of the daily fan art that you do see across not just Japan but across the world
Yes, for
as a
sure.
whole. It's quite frankly, the amount of work that comes out of fans is crazy. I don't know how they have the time to do it. Quite frankly,
Yeah,
it's
and they're so
ridiculous.
talented too, right? Like
Yes,
if they're that talented, they can probably get really good jobs as illustrators and stuff like that. So I really appreciate the fact that they take their time and make these awesome illustrations for us.
there was one Keith. I can't remember his last name. He got a job working on the anime
Oh, really?
through his fan
Oh,
art
I wasn't
work.
aware
Yeah,
of
he
that.
got
That's cool.
which is fantastic. And I don't know what he's doing on it because he's
Mm.
obviously not really allowed to talk too much about it. But it just goes. And I think of Nocon Kid as well, actually, with Shenmue Three.
If you're that talented, it would kind of be a waste to not have him on the team.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
I'm going to go into Shenmue Three now. Obviously, the game's been kickstarted. It's got a publisher through Deep Silver. It's gone through its fair share trials and tribulations. I would be fair to say in terms of the deal with Epic, which I know caused a bit of a ruckus with some people. Personally, I couldn't care where Shenmue was. I would play it wherever it was.
Hmm.
I just wanted the game. That's my personal opinion. I know others don't share that, but coming to release day and the game itself and firing it up for the first time, and obviously you reviewed it for IGN Japan, so you probably
Yes.
got it a little bit earlier. um, Talk me through your thoughts of Shenmue 3 playing the finished product.
It's a difficult thing because I think it's a very good game. I think it's a really good game that really plays like a Shenmue game should play. Right, it has all those elements that are so important to the series. So like we've been saying, there's no game like Shenmue,
Yeah,
and I think Shenmue 3 was the first game that made me feel quite obviously I'm playing Shenmue again. So to have that feeling alone makes it such a special video game for me. And then at the same time, there are some things it does that are in a niche way probably, but really remarkable and revolutionary. Even I think, like the way everything is interconnected to this game is insane. Like um, you have like 80 shops in one game where you can buy stuff, and like uh, buying stuff at those shops at first glance, it doesn't really matter if you buy a plate or not, but then you start collecting the move scrolls and you realize I need to find a blue plate that looks like
yeah,
this, but
yeah.
there's like 5 stores that sell plates, and like which one of them have the right plates. And it really starts to work. Like these shops, you really start to understand that they have a meaning within the game, and then you start collecting the chobuchans inside the game.
You do,
And
yeah,
you as a Shenmue fan, like looking at the details is really something that's always been fun, but it really never had a purpose. You could look at, except for like the Hazuki basement, stuff like that.
yeah, yeah,
Generally walking around and looking at the environment was stuff we loved, but stuff that really didn't have a purpose. So for most people, they were like, why should I care that I can open the shelves? But no, there's like real purpose to opening the shelves. And well, you're not opening shelves, but like looking at the environment and finding how masterfully all these chobuchans are hidden. And first, I was just doing that, for the sake of how fun it is to find them and collect them. But then you realize, okay, so these Chobachan, I also need to collect a certain amount of them to exchange them for a martial arts scroll again. So everything this world has created is interconnected in such an interesting way. And then you have the fights, the training. I think the fights itself, the battle system itself, is obviously not as good as the original Shenmue's, but I think
yeah.
the
Agree.
training and how it does that is it creates something really special, which I think hasn't really been mentioned. Which is the fact that normally it became an RPG, right? You have to level up
Yes,
Ryo and
yeah,
his
yeah.
moves. How do you normally level up a character in an RPG?
Well, you grind, you repeat, you train, don't you? Whatever it is.
For a normal RPG, you keep fighting with weak enemies, right?
Yes, you do.
You keep fighting and fighting and fighting. It's never, you're not training, you're fighting, and by fighting you're gaining experience. I think one of the things that I really love about Shenmue is that it's about martial arts, and at the same time it finds a way to not be overly violent, because like there's only like a handful of actual fights in the game, right?
Yeah,
It's all about training to overcome yourself and to be able to beat that one opponent. Actually, like in the game, it does that twice. That's kind of like a problem, I think. But like both in Bailu and Niawu, there's only one big guy you have to beat, and in order to beat this guy, you find ways to train. You find masters to learn from, and you get a higher dan each time you fight, but you're not fighting bad guys, you're fighting other guys that are training as well. So you're learning how to communicate in a way with each other by fighting. That's like what martial arts would really be like. You're not always fighting the bad guy, you're fighting for a bigger purpose, kind of, right? And I think what's really cool is the sparring element, which you can do at many different places, and it doesn't matter where you do it. Like in Bailu, you can practice as the dojo, or you can practice with Master Feng or with the girl, for example, right?
yes,
It
yeah,
doesn't matter with who you do it, but the fact that you're sparring with your father's old teacher is such a special feeling. And I would have wanted that guy to have more phrases in the game, more dialogue, more
yeah.
depth into that. But even without that depth, the fact that you can go to that guy and train together with him is like in a way storytelling, I think, in a way that only a video game can do, as because you're feeling as you're sparring, it's not just grinding. You're feeling that you're fighting with this special person. And I think that that's really is something that Shenmue didn't really do before. It tried kind of like, in Shenmue 1 you could spar with Fuxam, but you could only do it for once a day and only for a little bit of time, which made practicing a throw move such a pain in the ass. And I always dreamed of being able to spar with Fuxam as much as possible. And in that regard, I really think Shenmue 3 delivered on that. And through sparring with these people, I'm sorry, I always remember their names by the Japanese characters, but there's the guy in Yahoo, the fat guy, I think his name is Shu or something.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So you can spar with him, and then in the end, you set on a journey with him, and you're like, who is this guy? I hardly know him. But if you go to his place every day and you take your time to spar with him, even without knowing him through the story, well, that would have been better, obviously. But if you can, kind of communicate with him through training, that creates such a special feeling. And I think, like, not beating up people, but sparring together with people. The fact that Shenmue incorporated its RPG systems in that way is really special, and I think it doesn't receive enough credits for that. So I think that's really one really good part of Shenmue. And then there's the obvious problem of the story. It didn't advance enough.
Yeah.
It's the problem is that at this point, when you've waited that long, it sounds funny to say, but I think many Shenmue fans can relate. Is that I would rather have had a really bad game, but one that really advanced the story. I think what we got is a really good game that didn't advance the story.
Yeah, yeah. It's the one thing I think that not a foul taste in people's mouths. I'm probably being a bit over the top, but definitely could have been improved. Was some of the little elements around the story. You talk about Grandmaster Feng, for example. They got that one cut scene under the tree where he meets Rio for the first time. That's a perfect Shenmue
That's
scene. I wanted more of
fantastic.
those
Yeah.
sorts of things. Those were the sorts of things I wanted more of. Those sorts of, because they build the environment, they build the character, and they build the sort of motivation as to why Rio's there, and also why they're trying to help him. Like, you talk about the final scenes at the castle, and you've got Grandmaster Bay there, you've got Zhu there, you've got Xiling, the Shrine Maiden there. I just wanted a little bit more as to why.
Quite. I wanted a lot more, to be honest. Like, I think for Shu, it's because you could spar with him. I felt a connection, but
Yeah,
I mean, the girl. To be honest, I don't remember her name, and that's so weird because for the original Shenmue, I knew the name of every single character.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
the fact that I can't instantly remember her name really shows something, and that's the biggest fault of the game. I think it was too ambitious. It tried too many game things centered around the gameplay. The forklifts with driving the machines and having them arrive at the game center the next day. It's all great. It's all really well done. I think, like, some people didn't understand it, probably. Like, it's not been reviewed very well. But I think in all those respects, I was really amazed by how well made the game was. Like, just for the first time walking through Niawu, it took me days to see everything. Like, I remember I was reviewing it, so I needed to hurry. But then I started playing it in the morning,
yeah.
and and it was evening, like it was already night, and I realized, oh my god, I didn't advance the story at all today. It's like there's not many games that have that much detail for the player to savor, and in that regard, I really think it's like an amazing game. But in the end, like like I said, I there's so many amazing games today, and there's only one story that's intrigued me like that, and in that regard, it just didn't deliver. I can't say it
Yeah.
delivered in that regard. And there were some really touching moments in Bailu. And
Yep,
but then
very true.
again, like, there were some things they didn't answer in Bailu that they probably only could answer in Bailu. Like the Shenmue tree. Like, tell me a bit more about why this game needs to have the title of that tree. Because after this, we're gonna leave Bailu. Okay, maybe there are more Shenmue trees in other places, sure, but this the ending of Shenmue 2, having finally reached the Shenmue 2, the Shenmue 3, finally realizing, okay, we're really getting to the core of the story right now, and then in Shenmue 3, not mentioning at all what that tree means. Like, that's like a huge miss in my books. But still, Bailu had some of these really important moments of feeling the connection with your father and stuff. So I was still kind of like, okay, I'm kind of getting what I want. But then after I arrived in Niao, at first I got really into the gameplay stuff, into just seeing the world, and I was really fulfilled. But then a few days later, I was like, okay, now it's time to go after the story. And I start feeling more lonely and more lonely the more I played. Like it just didn't answer those questions, and even without answering the questions, like, even Shenhua felt like I had such a deep connection with her in Bailu. But then after arriving in Niao, it was kind of like, okay, I'm going out now. See you in the evening. And then, like, when you go back, this is like, okay, I'm going to sleep right now. And that would be like all you would do with her. And then, of course, there's a few special moments, talking from the balcony together. But like the depth of living together with someone that I really felt in Bailu was gone after coming to Niao. So it,
Yeah.
it really felt like after arriving in Niao, it suddenly became a game that has all the elements that a Shenmue game needs, but it doesn't build on them anymore.
Yeah, and I know Cedric's gone on record to say that the ending was changed and bits and pieces of Meow were changed from the original plan. So that might come into why it happened. I mean, I want to talk about those conversations with Shenhua and Bailu. They're some of the best conversations in the game.
Yeah, sure. I think that part was amazing. There's really my favorite part of the first two games was Guilin. So walking the mountains with Shenhua, and staying with her at home was totally like a continuation of that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then I think what I would say about Bailu is that it teaches you what it is like to be with people or feel people in multiple ways. So like when you go home, it's like you learn what it feels like to live together with someone. And then when you are learning martial arts, you learn what it feels like to be with this weird martial arts master, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then at the same time, the whole time you're in Bailu, you feel this deep, fake connection with your father being here a long time ago. So, like in three different ways, it shows how Ryo has a connection between different sorts of people and in different sorts of ways. And I think for that reason, it's a really beautiful game. And in that regard, I think Bailu was totally a fantastic experience.
definitely. And more of that, I think, for Shenmue 4. Moving on to Shenmue 4 itself, what do you hope for Shenmue 4 going forward?
That's a difficult question. It's hard to say because I meet Yusan from time to time. I don't know what it looks like or anything, but I have a vague idea of what he wants, and I had that when he was making Shenmue 3. But at that point, I hadn't seen the full game, right? So talking to someone before he makes a game and talking someone to someone after he's made it is so different because at that point when it's not out yet, you have to kind of like imagine what he means, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But after Shenmue 3 is released, you're like, okay, so that's what he meant. And in that regard, I think for him, he is really, with his arcade roots and all, he's really about making interesting game systems, about making something that's technically interesting. So I
yeah,
think that was the most important thing for him. I don't know. It's just what I think when talking to him, what I feel. And in that regard, I think there's this weird gap in what the fans want and what Yusan wants, because I think that the story isn't as important for him as it is for us. That's really what I feel. So in that regard, he will probably, if he gets the chance, make another amazing game with an amazing world. But I am worried if he cares as much as we do to make this story really something special. It feels like that's not his main focus. And I think what made Shenmue 1 and 2 different in that regard, I don't know, it's just me speculating, but probably just the fact that it was such a bigger team and a more professional team, probably in that regard, that there were probably some really good writers on the team. So of course, Yusan originally wrote the script for the game, and there's a main story he has that he wants to deliver. But I think in the end, for him, the most important thing is to make something that is technically impressive, and without as big as a team as before. uh, I think the focus on story is something that becomes smaller and smaller the smaller the team becomes. So that's kind of like a worry I have, because for me, after having waited for such a long time, I don't really care about something that's technically impressive anymore. I just like, even a very simple game that tells the story would be really interesting for me, and that just doesn't seem to be the most important thing for Yusan, which I totally respect and understand. Like that's just his background, that's just who he is. So in that regard, I just want him to make the game that he wants to make. But I don't think that after getting the feedback from Shenmue 3, he will suddenly start to make a big change in how big the story of the focus should be. I think that's really, there's a big gap in what we feel and what Yusan feels in that regard.
So is there, sort of following up onto that? Is there an argument within, obviously, Shenmue Three? You've got the core systems of the game in place. You've got a fighting system that I know needs some touching up here or there, but you've got the core elements of the game system there. So from a creative standpoint, would it make more sense for those systems to be used and then really go in on the story for Shenmue 4 while polishing up some minor things that were criticized in terms of the gameplay systems for Shenmue 3?
I think it's difficult because I think Yusan's nature is to keep uh, making revolutionary things. So like, if he has something that's a foundation for the future, like Shenmue 3, will he just build on that and like make something that's kind of like an extension or that of that, or does he want to make something that's even more impressive the next time? I think probably what he wants is the latter. The problem is like, what kind of budget will he get, and
Yeah,
what
yeah.
will he be able to do with that? I think in that regard, it's so difficult to speculate, but I don't think, because if Shenmue 1 and 2 was actually quite similar system wise, right?
Yes, they were.
He really improved on certain things, but the core of how the game works was pretty similar. But
Yeah,
what the big difference is that Shenmue 1 was generally well received, right?
yeah,
Uh,
generally.
Generally, of course, it wasn't understood by everyone, but I think it was not like, Shenmue 3, like, it doesn't have a very good score at Metacritic. It's not like, outside of the fan base, everything says it's an impressive game or something like that. Which I think it's not. I think it's impressive, to be honest. Many people, even like within the fan base, don't seem to have that opinion. But I thought that it was a really impressive game in many ways. Like the world they built, the city they built in Yaowu, might not be that big, but the amount of details that it has, I think it was really impressive. But I think that Yusam, seeing all the feedback, won't want to go with the same base for his next game because it just wasn't well received. So if he wants to make something that's technically impressive, he knows that the base that he already has isn't going to do it.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting take on it. So, are you, obviously, this is all speculation. Are we thinking that maybe from your interaction, obviously, you've interviewed him many times, that he would almost want to start again? Would that be fair to say?
Um, I don't think he wants to start again. I have this one interview after he released Shenmue 3, like, and how he
Yeah,
looked back, and how what he wants to do for the series in the future. And
yeah.
it sounds like, I think I would say, like he really wants to fix the mistakes that he made.
Hmm.
And in my eyes, like, the only big mistakes are story and like something that we haven't discussed about world building yet. But I think he wants to make it an accessible game for modern video gamers.
Yeah.
And yeah, to be honest, I don't think that's the right way to go, because I think that's a difficult task. I think, especially for a game like Shenmue, it's something that I think you should really focus on the niche people, and then make it a niche people a niche product that can sell, that can be cheap enough to justify to be the fact to be niche, right? But
Yeah.
I think what Usam really wants is to make this game that modern gamers that haven't been in touch with Shenmue before understand and respect and like. I think that's the direction he wants to go to. So in order to do that, I think he really wants to change a lot of fundamental things about it. But still, I think at the same time, he does want to make sure that it's something that the fans will appreciate at the same time.
And that's a tough balance to make, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, I think it's an impossible balance because it's not gonna be that game. I think Shenmue is not going to be a game everyone in modern day understands and likes, because especially with the ambitions of Suzuki-san, because you know he has huge ambitions, and to make something with ambitions like that and make it something everyone likes, you need to have a triple A budget, and he doesn't have that. So I don't think it's the right way to go for him, but it's just his nature to want to make the most ambitious, technically impressive thing that there is. And I think it's, if I would, I keep saying I would think this kind of thing would work better, but that's just not his nature. So for him to go against his nature and make something wouldn't work either. So in the end, it's hard, but the biggest problem remains that with his current ambitions, it might be difficult to find a publisher.
Fingers crossed they do. But I know they're pitching. Obviously, Cedric told us that just before Christmas. So we'll see what comes of it. I've got everything crossed. I do think we're in a better position than we were, especially with an anime on the way as well.
Like that anime could do a lot of things. It could make people interested in the series. And at the same time, this industry is getting old. It's like it's like we've been playing video games for 30 years, right? And
Yeah,
at first, making money was all it was about, but now it kind of has a more artistic value as well, right? So for
yeah,
publishers, it can be interesting. Maybe it wouldn't sell big numbers, but to have, a Shenmue title, to have published a game that has been, so fundamental for the evolution of the industry, it could be interesting even if you're not going to make a lot of money on it. And I really hope that there's a publisher around like that. Like this, I think in the end, like, I'm really grateful for what Deep Silver did in that regard. Like, I don't know, but maybe it didn't make them that money, but at least they've contributed to the legacy of Shenmue, and I really hope, and I think it should be justifiable for the bigger publishers to just have that on your portfolio in a way, right? To have uh supported such an important game in this industry.
yeah, absolutely. And Shenmue is it was a trailblazer. It's the reason we've got what we've got today in terms of the open world genre. Who wouldn't want to contribute to a name like that? But I mean, obviously, then you got to talk about it from a business point of view, and we've touched on this in terms of ambition to budget and everything else that goes on in between in development of a game. And I want to touch on actually your interviews with Yu Suzuki, actually, because you've interviewed him a number of times over the years. How has your relationship sort of developed with him over the years, from your first interview with him to what it's like these days?
There's so much in that regard that I just can't talk about, I think. I guess from a personal perspective, but I think it's safe to say that we're really good friends. And like that first time, well, actually I had met him before briefly, but the first time I really got time with him was at Magic Monaco in 2019.
Yeah.
And at that time, we really spent quite a lot of time together because we were in the same airplane, so we were waiting in the same seats
Oh,
for the
okay. Yeah.
transit and stuff like that. So we really talked a lot at that time. And like upon the release for Shenmue, we were together in Germany, we were together in Los Angeles, we were together in Kyoto for Magic Kyoto. So like it kind of felt like we were traveling the world together. So and Yu-san also really enjoyed traveling in his earlier years, which is probably why Shenmue 2 turned out the way it is. So just not only about video games, but we talk a lot about like traveling and stuff like that, and how that inspired him to make Shenmue and stuff like that. And then after the release of Shenmue 3, there was no real reason to contact him anymore. So then, like a few months after release, I really started missing him. So I came up with this reason, to interview him, which became the last interview I did with him about the future of the series. And now after that, maybe we meet like 2 or 3 times a year, have dinner together. Just not I'm not interviewing him at the moment, but we
No,
meet from
yeah.
times to times.
Excellent. It's nice to hear. Magic Monaco 2019. That's a throwback.
It's
I
not that
was
long
there.
ago, actually. It's only 2 years ago if you think of it.
I know, but it's gone so quickly, hasn't it? Those two
It's
years,
like a
man.
totally different world for us because we had 20 years without anything, and after it's only been 2 years, but we've got Shenmue 3 in between, and that's like 10 years for us to have that game. It's like so much stuff happened for us. So in that regard, like, I remember at that moment, for the interview, he showed me the game, and that was the first time I saw it, and like it was a complete mystery. So like just seeing Leo walk for the first time, I remembered I had to try to not go insane, So and now I've played the game for over 200 hours. It's like it's common for us now to have Shenmue 3.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
in 2019, Monaco, seeing that game for the first time was like obviously for me the highlight of my career as a video game writer, and I don't think there's going to be anything like that in the future.
yeah. That was a really good time, Monaco. And we talk about the intervening gap now. Obviously, we've had Shenmue 3 and we have an anime on the way.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the anime and how that can fit in with Shenmue itself?
Initially, to be honest, I wasn't that interested because I think Shenmue is interesting as a story because it is a video game, because it creates
Yeah,
those worlds, because it really makes it feel like you're experiencing itself. But I was really happy because it could create a lot of new interest for potential new players, which might help the series in the future. Um, and especially because the director is known for like One Punman, which is like a really action heavy game anime. And personally, like for me, the most important parts of Shenmue are really like the quiet moments, like walking with Shenmue through the mountains and stuff like that. So I was worried, like, is this going to be some like battle manga where Ryo faces a different opponent in each episode or something like that? That was something I wouldn't be interested in. But then Famitsu once did a really long interview
yes,
with
they did.
Yusan and I think the producer it was,
Yeah,
and that interview really showed that they understood, of Yusan, of course, but the producer as well, that he really understood what Shenmue is. So after that interview, I really started feeling that, okay, these are really genuinely people that understand Shenmue that are going to make this anime. So that got me a lot more interested than before that.
yeah. I think that reassured a lot of fans actually, because I think the one of the biggest concerns was would they get Shenmue? Do they understand the essence of it? And actually, that Famitsu interview, I think, gave a nice feel
Yeah,
to
I
it.
think it gave a really good impression by I really felt as a fan, okay, they know what Shenmue is, they understand it, and they want to pay homage to it. So in that regard, I feel much better about it now. And it remains to me though the most happy I am about it is the fact that it keeps the series alive. It has the potential to reach new fans that normally wouldn't play video games. So of course, it's only good that something like this exists.
Yeah, it is, and I think the franchise is in a far stronger position now than it was, and we need. I think the franchise needs to take advantage of that, and I think the anime can, like you say, it can bring in new people to the franchise, and if they start marketing sort of DVDs, merchandise, it all makes that franchise more viable. So when you're having conversations around a budget for a fourth game, it makes those conversations easier, doesn't it? Really?
I definitely think so. So like one thing though, you said it's in a favorable spot right now. I think that's true and not at the same time because, like we said before, it wasn't received that well, to be honest. So before Shenmue 3, there was always the chance. Nobody knew, is this going to be a huge success or will it just be something for the fans? I think the biggest problem Shenmue has right now is that Shenmue 3 didn't do that well for as far as we know, right? So this is a big thing for many publishers. Okay, they now have an example of how Shenmue did in modern times.
Yeah, true.
So that is a big problem for it. But at the same time, I think if it is more alive than before, and if there's things going on like the anime, there's still I think more chance because it's more alive than before. Before it was just completely that for so many years that really gave it a tough spot. But I think at least having been out there and Yusan showing that there's these things he wants to improve, gives at least more hope than before Shenmue 3 was announced, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think if the anime is successful bringing people in, and they bring the merchandise in, they do all and market all of that around it, I think you can create a really strong brand there. It's a lot of work. I'm hopeful. I've got everything
Me
crossed
too. I
for
really,
Shenmue 4 and beyond.
we've come this far, and we came out of nowhere, and it happened. So giving up now is definitely not the right decision. I think if we keep striving for it, and Yusan obviously still wants to make it, so I don't think we need to be realistic, but there's no
Yeah.
reason to be negative about the current circumstances, I think.
No, I would agree with that. And sort of my final point and question before I bring us to a close is: do you have a message for the Shenmue fans who are wanting Shenmue 4 and beyond? I think you've sort of a little bit touched on this, but is there a message for the Shenmue community going forward from
Well,
you?
obviously, I'm also just a fan, so I can't say anything big. But you guys are so amazing, and I don't belong to that amazing group. That's one thing I want to say because I only started moving after Shenmue 3 was released. So the fact that for all these years you were all so vocal about it, did so many things to make it happen. Saved Shenmue, right? That's
Yeah.
that's why we have Shenmue 3, and I wasn't part of that. So in that regard, you guys are so much more amazing than I am because I'm just taking profit. I was just at the right place at the right time to be in this position, but it's all because you guys made it happen. So I'm really really grateful for that. And because we did it once, well, I didn't do it, so I shouldn't say we maybe, but I'm definitely doing all I can to be part of this movement the next time. So as long as it happened once, it's gonna happen again. So just don't give up hopes. Keep loving Shenmue, and I'll do my best to do the same.
Thank you, Ezra. That's a really lovely message going forward. And I think for anybody who is new listening to this, hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 on the 4th of every month on Twitter. Join in, make ourselves heard, and we will get a Shenmue 4. All that remains for me to say, Ezra, is thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me. I know it's late evening in Japan now. I've had an absolutely brilliant time talking to you.
Same here. Thanks for having me.